Well, welcome back. We've still got Ciaran Davis here, head of Australian Radio Network, and guest host James Manning, to talk about the radio results now in each state. James, I guess let's start with how justified Macquarie Radio is to be upset about all the fuss over FM radio when they have two stations performing very well.
Well, I think there's two things. I think probably Macquarie Radio would be happy that radio's a big story again, but the sort of downside for them is, look, they're historically number one, and people have sort of got used to it, you know, and they overlook it a bit, and they have, I think they've got 2CH now is outperforming some of the FM stations, so they've got quite a good story there. And I guess, Ciaran, my question to you might be that you'd like to be, I guess, at number one for so long people take it for granted, but you've got to keep marketing and just keep telling your story.
Yeah, and yeah, I think they have a point in terms of being number one, and Ray made a very good argument on air the other day. But you're right, the talk about radio over the last week, in the last couple of months, has been extraordinary. So as a medium, the publicity that we can generate is extraordinary, and shows that radio is not dying as a medium. Yeah,
and I guess the other big story out of Sydney this week is, the effect, the fall, as you mentioned before to Ciaran, the impact of Today FM. I think we'll probably see some dollars there short term, but we'll need to see a few surveys before people get to start throwing the chequebook around too much.
Correct, and even from our perspective, this is one survey out of 8 in the year. It's a very good start, but the hard work really continues.
Yeah, look, in Melbourne, ARN, another good story. Gold and Mix are both on the way up. You've been working on those stations for a long time. See some improvement there?
Yeah, Melbourne is a market that we think is still up for grabs for everybody, in that there's been a lot of people tuning around to different stations with all the changes that went around. It hasn't really settled down yet, so I think there's going to be a lot more changes in Melbourne in the next 2 or 3 surveys.
Sort of good news for your competitors down there too, because Southern Cross Austereo, the Today Network brand isn't broken, because Fox still performing pretty well down there. Triple M, the Hot Breakfast, still doing very well. And Nova too got away a new breakfast show down there without a loss of audience, so they'd be pretty happy with that. Yep. Up in Brisbane, number one station there, 97.3, back on top. Great news for them. And your little untold story there, often 4KQ had a blinder too, didn't it?
Yeah, so it's a very competitive market, probably the most competitive, so with very few share points between ourselves and Nova up there. But it's going to change again. I think that'll be a market that'll see a lot of changes over the next year.
Yeah, although you don't want it to change too much, right?
No.
Pretty happy with them.
What about Adelaide, James?
Yeah, Adelaide 102.3. The only one of your stations actually didn't improve their share, but you're still number one FM in that market, which has got to be good news.
Smaller market, so shares go up and down a lot bigger with a smaller market, but 32 surveys as number one FM in the market. We're pleased with that.
Yeah, look, 5AA did very well there too in the talk. Over in Perth, you haven't got a station there, but you're a shareholder in Nova over there. They did a reasonable survey, and they've been performing very well for a long time.
They've done exceptionally well over the last 18 months. Really good team down there, and very happy with the results there.
Yeah.
Southern Cross Austereo in Perth did well though?
Yes, yeah, particularly their mix. They swapped their drive and breakfast shows there. Fred Boddick's in drive now. Claresy, Shane and Kimber, I think it is, do the breakfast show there, and they both perform pretty well. Fred's only just started in drive, so we'll see how that goes. Just one last quick one for Ciaran, maybe. This overall improvement everywhere, it's not just in Sydney, is there? The signing of the Kyle and Jackie O, has that sort of re-energised the whole place, and, a refocus there that's really spread company-wide?
I'm not so sure about re-energised. I think it probably reaffirmed the strategy that we have in place and have put in place over the last 24 months, that we are very ambitious. We do want to become the number one radio network in Australia, and being able to attract talent like Kyle and Jackie to our network probably just confirms to us that how well we're going, but we still have a distance to go.
All right, well, good luck with that, Ciaran, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ciaran Davis there, head of ARN. Let's get a check now on the media sector's performance on the share market this week. We're joined by Evan Lucas from IG now. Evan, good to have your company. Southern Cross, we've just been talking about it obviously, but that impact to the loss of market share to KIIS FM on Kyle and Jackie O's move, but what's the impact been on Southern Cross shares?
Yeah, when the actual story was released on Monday and also on Tuesday, sort of also coming onto that, we did see a fairly reasonable fall on what was going on with Southern Cross. The board themselves obviously announced that they have lost market share. They do know that. That will be probably slightly impacting, according to the brokers, on earnings. It's still going to wait and see. It is obviously a short-term movement, but the market reaction was negative, and it did lose around about 3.5% on Monday on that news. So that was very interesting to see that it's such a big swing on what is realistically only a sort of a medium-sized part of their earnings stream. But that was the case, and that Kyle and Jackie O news was certainly detrimental to the share price, and the investors saw it that way as well.
Evan, we've also seen Prime, Win and APM benefiting off this talk, with, of course, of media reforms with Malcolm Turnbull. What have you made of it?
Yeah, interesting coming out of that as well, and that also puts Southern Cross back in the frame as well, and they're actually seeing the swing back up the other way, because this is probably more influential to Southern Cross, also to Prime particularly, and it all comes back down to those reach rules that have been on the table since the last government as well. Stephen Conroy was very, very strong in his movements on that. It's all about reaffirming regional sort of content particularly. There are some parts of the MPs out there, particularly the Nationals and also regional MPs on the Liberal side, that are concerned that they will lose that. Malcolm Turnbull was trying to douse that down, and when he did put that in there, that part of the changes to the reach rules will mean that regional content still has to say it 45 minutes or as much as 90 minutes per week has to be regional news. Was good for Prime. You saw Prime jump up quite strongly. Southern Cross has jumped up today around about 3.5%. Also good for APN and Win. They're both seeing sort of moves there, because we do know that 9, also 7 and 10 are out there looking at redistributing how they currently do their regional content. So was good on that perspective. If we can see that reach rule finally sort of moved on and changed, it will be beneficial, particularly to Southern Cross and to Prime, who are both currently looking at probably new homes with regards to their tie-ups with the city stores.
OK, what about Fairfax? Its second largest shareholder trimming its holdings.
Yeah, having a look at what Simon Maris is doing there, very interesting sort of development. He has probably shed out, they reckon, on around about 1.5 to maybe 1.3% sort of move on that. So that means he moves down from 9.8% to around about 8.4%. Still wants his position on the board, but it does come down to the fact that he was looking at the Macquarie Radio as a tie-up. That's obviously fallen through, and was one of the reasons why you've seen such a massive turnaround on the share price on Fairfax. So he's probably taking a bit of profit, expecting those sort of mergers or acquisitions to really be material for a while, and moving away from that. So that was interesting, considering that Fairfax is at an almost 18-month high, has had a very good turnaround since the results. But it just puts a little bit of a lid and a little bit of a dampener on that story, considering that one of the major shareholders may be seeing a top on that share price, and he's taking profit and moving out of that. So that was an interesting story to come out of the share registry this week. All
right, Evan, thanks so much for that.
Thanks, Ingrid.
Evan Lucas at IG there. Well, Communications Minister Malcolm Turnbull reopened the discussion about media regulation, indicating he's sympathetic to industry calls to scrap the audience reach rule and cross-platform ownership restrictions, a development that would allow media ownership to become even more concentrated.
Diversity is no longer an issue. Competition is greater than it ever has been. That's undoubtedly true. Why not just leave it media mergers and ownership issues to the ACCC?
The coalition hit back, leaving the minister hosing down concerns, saying the government would not remove rules forcing broadcasters to produce local content. Well, for more on all this, let's return to James Manning, of course, in the studio here. James, what have you made of all this talk about media reforms this week? Well,
look, if you're cynical and you look at the past history, you've got to think, well, what are the chances of anything happening? You've got to say, well, pretty slim, you know. But having said that, everybody's making the right noises. The minister seems supporting the abolition of the reach rule, looking at the cross-media regulations. He's met with all the, or most of the industry CEOs last week.
Did we hear of anything to come out of that?
Yeah, well, it's just that, look, yeah, he's up for it, you know. There's general consensus among a few people aren't quite, I mean, the Seven network isn't really behind it, but most other people are, you know. All the big players are pretty up for it. But you look, the Prime Minister, though, is not quite on the same page, you figure, as his Communications Minister. You know, he's saying, look, we want to be careful how we proceed, we won't be rushing into it. Malcolm Turnbull's come out and said, look, we're going through a period of consultation, which you've got to think as well. They're probably surveying voters to find out if there's going to be anything negative in it, because, you know, especially members of Parliament in regional areas very, very worried about any negative reaction. Could they lose their seats? Yep. The Labor Party decides to beat this up as saying, oh, look, regional communities are going to be worse off. You know, they'll really back off from this quickly. Yeah, lots to watch there, and we'll definitely keep an eye on it. But let's move on now to the Media Federation. It appointed a new chairman, combining its board and executive. Yeah, look, Peter Horgan's taken over there from Henry Tager, two people we've had regulars on the show last year. Look, Henry Tager from Media Brands, he's got a lot of international duties now across the group, so he's spending a bit less time in Australia, and he's had 3 years at the top, so Peter Horgan, a good choice to take over there. All right, and Foxtel also launching its Presto movie services. Yeah, look, this is quite important for Foxtel, I think, this offering. It's we've talked a little bit about it before. It's being able to get all their movie channels online and getting nothing else. So as a 30-day deal, you can get it for $4.99 as a sample, but if you sign up, there's no contracts. You can go month by month. It'll cost you $9 19 or 20 bucks a month, but you get all those movie channels and you get them on your mobile devices.
All right, we do have to take a quick break here on Media Week, but coming up we'll take a look at the ratings for Week 10. That's next.